India is in a volatile neighborhood. In spite of its unique geographical location and largely peaceful relations with most of the countries of the world and our neighbors, of course, we have had almost permanently hostile relationship with Pakistan and a strained one with China, which is now turned adversarial. Changes have taken place in our neighborhood. You must have followed our previous stories that we have covered, the Afghanistan one, the Taliban taking over the government, and that has suddenly shifted the regional equations in the favor of our neighbors with whom we do not share such a friendly bond. So we see that China and Pakistan are going through a period of churn which could have long-term implications, and it is essential to understand the changes and its impact that it could have on India and the region. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and good morning. Today, we have joined for yet another episode of Soldiers Speak in punekarnews to discuss and get insight on the China countering the dragon. To discuss on the same, we have with us in the studio our eminent guests, Lieutenant General Sanjeev Kanal and Colonel Ajay Singh, sir. I welcome you both. Lieutenant General Sanjeev Kanal is a third-generation army officer commissioned in the Regiment of Artillery 1981, an alumnus of National Defence Academy, Indian Military Academy, College of Defence Management, and the National Defence College. The general has vast command and staff experience. A qualified helicopter pilot with combat flight experience, he has been the Deputy Military Secretary of Artillery before commanding an artillery division, an area in central India, and the Officers Training Academy, Chennai. He has also been a United Nations observer in Angola and a faculty in the Indian Military Academy and the College of Defence Management. He has been conferred with the Param Vishisht Seva Medal in 2020 and the Ati Vishisht Seva Medal in 2018 by the Honorable President of India. Welcome, sir. I'm so glad you could join us for today's discussion.
The show with you.
Also, we have with us Colonel Ajay Singh, sir. He's a writer and historian with 5 books to his name. In fact, his latest book, The Final Draft, was launched just a fortnight ago. Sir, a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Vivek. Such a pleasure being on this panel like it always is. Looking forward to the discussion.
So you know the topic, you know the agenda. So, Kanal, sir, I would like to start with you. That India and China have had tensions ever since their intrusion into the Ladakh. It has been going prolonged, but recent developments that have not yet been resolved. So what is the status now? And do you feel we have been able to counter them adequately?
Thank you for this lovely question, Vivek. I think it's a very apt question to set the ball rolling for any discussion on China. So, you know, when Mr. George Fernandes was the Raksha Mantri of our country in the late 90s, he had created a little flurry when he had said that India's enemy number 1 is China. That time everybody said, "Arey, what is he saying?" And then very recently, our late CDS General Bipin Rawat, while speaking in a seminar, had also said that the threat number 1 to India is China. And sure enough, these statements are coming true today. And, you know, for nearly 4 decades, on the ill-defined border that we have with China, nearly 3,450 kilometers of border with China, which is ill-defined because the McMahon line was, you know, a line which was made by a rather thick pencil on a very old technology map. And because of that, the perceptions of where the actual line of control or the border between India and China lies varies between the 2 countries. So there is an actual border, then there is an Indian perception of the border, then there is a Chinese perception of the border. And to add to the confusion, there is an Indian perception of the Chinese perception, and there is a Chinese perception of the Indian perception. So there are at least 4 or 5 lines on the map, you know, when you come down to the brass tacks of seeing this problem in its entirety. And both sides knew that it is a difficult problem to resolve. and both the countries are developing nations. And so for 4 decades, there was not much problem on the border. But ever since Xi Jinping came to power in 2013, you would notice that the intrusions along the line of control, line of actual control, increased. In 2013, we had Depsang. Then in 2014, we had Chumar. In 2017, we had the Doklam crisis. Of course, that was not actually our border, but Doklam, since we have this arrangement with Bhutan, and when the Chinese had come into Doklam, it was threatening our, Siliguri corridor. So we took certain strong steps. And then now in 2017, again we had, in 2020, we had these intrusions in the eastern Ladakh, Pangong Tso, and Gogra hot springs, and Depsang again. And as late as this year, we've had small incidents in Arunachal. We've had an incident in Sikkim, Nakula, and also an incident in Uttarakhand. So China is flexing its muscle. It is testing waters. And Xi Jinping has been wanting to establish something called One China, or as in one of the articles Colonel Ajay has written, I read, he called it Akhand China. So these are all endeavors towards that. So what he's trying to do in Taiwan, what he's trying to do in the South China Sea, what he's trying to do with India, signaling to the world that China has arrived. And China is ready now to call the shots on the global stage. Unfortunately for Mr. Xi Jinping, the pushback from India was violent. You know what happened in Galwan, we all know that story of bravery where, Colonel Babu lost his life, and he has recently been conferred with the very, very high gallantry award. So there was a pushback. And what India was in 1962, it isn't today. It's a totally transformed country. Our military might is much better, our equipment is better, our training is better. And our resolve and will to defend the nation's borders, its integrity and unity is much stronger. So China was surprised at the reaction. They thought that they would be able to sort of nibble away and change the status quo on the LAC. But the Indian reaction was swift, it was strong, and it showed resolve. And because of that, after about 12 rounds of talks at the corps commanders level, there has been a withdrawal from the Pangong Tso Lake area, the Fingers area, then the Gogra area, Galwan, and the only 2 sticking points now are Depsang and Hot Springs. So that will continue, I guess, because the strategic value of the Depsang plains is very high for both sides. And India has dug its heels in, so has China. Last winter, we had troops deployed there. Additional troops were moved in. As a matter of fact, one infantry division, its role was changed and it was moved to Ladakh. So yeah, strong presence from both sides. Mechanized forces have been moved in there, and both sides. It's not just from our side; it is from their side also. So they are also showing seriousness there, and India is also showing its seriousness there. That area is a stalemate, but from the rest of the areas where they had come, I think there has been a withdrawal, and status quo ante has been achieved to some extent, not fully but partially. There are people who say that because of these negotiations and the way the Chinese have withdrawn, the LAC has actually moved westwards. True to some extent, yes. But it is a no patrolling zone. It's a no patrolling zone, and therefore we can't really say that the LAC has actually shifted. It's only that now there is in the demilitarized zone, so to speak, there will be no patrolling, and troops will remain on either side. So that is what it is. And I think the way India reacted, especially that surprise action of occupying the Kailash range, I think that scared China. And because when we occupied Kailash range, we got domination. We could look into their rare areas. And they were totally surprised. They didn't expect the Indian troops walking around, and climbing those heights and suddenly occupying them all of a sudden. And till the time that Kailash range was occupied, the Chinese were being very obstinate. They were not budging from their stand. They were not ready to negotiate. And but the moment India occupied the Kailash range, their tone changed, their tenor changed. They started negotiating from a position of weakness, and India started negotiating from a position of strength. So that's how that was achieved. Like I said, just the hot springs and the Depsang Valley still remains unresolved. But I think as we go forward, that would also get resolved one way or the other. As we go along in this discussion, I think Colonel Ajay would also have some inputs on how he sees this thing panning out. Vivek?
Yes, sir. Surely, I would like to have his input also, and of course, I would like Colonel Ajay Singh sir to please put highlight on how this we had some good relations in the late 50s and early 60s, and how it has become tense and hostile eventually. So, what led to that? And then, of course, I'll be able to counter them adequately.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
See, I think General Kanal has brought out beautifully about the LAC being not just one LAC, but 5 different perceptions of the LAC. And if you take a look at the Chinese, have never given their own perception of the LAC. They will never lay it out. They change the goalposts each time. But to add on to one very important fact, what General Kanal brought about the Chinese having been taken the back foot by an offensive action, by an aggressive action, let me put it this way, in which we kind of managed to take position of dominance. There is one important thing that we must see. Okay, the behind the scene things. Like Xi Jinping, as General Kanal brought out, he has got that vision of greater China. But even within the closed Communist Party, there is a lot of power struggles which goes on. It's not just related to democracies. Even out there, perhaps it's far more than we know. He had to prove a point. And when his aggression began in Ladakh against the LAC, perhaps one gets the feeling that there was an element of miscalculation on their part. Because if you take a look at it, in the Ladakh military, in the region opposite India, there have been 4 commanders changed in 3 years. The initial commander who had led that aggression, the intrusion into India, was removed. They say he fell sick and he was sent to an appointment in Beijing. Now, these are indicators that perhaps things had not gone exactly as per plan, the way they planned it out to be. Now, we must remember the counter militarily, yes, we countered it wonderfully. But the counter was more than that. The economic counter, the banning of 59 apps, actually hurt them. It was the first time it happened. I mean, the West were talking about it. We just said, okay, nothing doing TikTok, everything else is banned. And look at the loss of revenues that they've incurred because as a market, they've got eyes on very strongly. Plus, look at the political counter. No way were our political leadership definitely did give backing to the military. Not once did they budge on the stance, not once did they water down the stance, which meant that national resolve was depicted as one which will be able to counter them. I think this overall, and I forgot one more thing which we discussed earlier on, the fact that we moved so aggressively towards building up alliances with the US, with Quad, now even with Russia, with Europe, with Britain. But we had never done that so blatantly earlier on. We always had a little fear of Chinese sensibilities. Now, let me put it this way, in a way, the gloves were off. And we began reacting the manner we felt. But I think it has been a very apt counter.
Right. So, of course, we have developed our relationship, and China has, at the same time, spoiled it. Like COVID-19 has adversely affected its bond with other countries of the world. Recently, Biden has announced that they will not take part in the Winter Olympics that is going to be organized in China. So China is going through its own political and economic churn these days. Economic,
Yeah.
as India has banned the Chinese products, software, and other products as well. But Xi Jinping has consolidated his hold on the power
Yes.
as well. So what does that imply?
Okay. Again, General Kanal gave you the hint when he said that in the intrusions began with Xi Jinping's elevation to the top position in the Communist Party of China, the president. That is when he began pushing his agenda of Akhand China, if I can call it that, not only in Ladakh, in the China seas, in Taiwan, everywhere else. Now, it was always on the cards. My reading is that he took advantage of COVID and his own ambitions and moved maybe 5 years too early. Perhaps it's a blessing for the world. They moved 5 years too early. Now, politically, what is happening in China? If you take a look at it, Xi Jinping has now become the most powerful Chinese ruler, even more powerful than Mao. He has eliminated all his rivals, his political rivals, right? And recently, he was being conferred as the title as the era-defining leader. What it means is his presidency for the third term in 2022 is more or less guaranteed. Now, this is dangerous because it is Xi Jinping who put China from the road from economic superpowerdom to political superpowerdom. In his eagerness to make sure that China is perceived as a superpower in the world, and he achieved that aim of the greater China, his actions, if he does take over as the third term, would be not good not only for India, but for the world as such. Because to the extent, he has also sacrificed the economy. If you notice, he had clambered on big business. Why? Because the big businessmen were perceived rivals. Jack Ma of Alibaba, Tencent, Evergrande, all these big firms he clamped down upon because he was eliminating all this there was a Taiwanese speaker who said the aim of this was so that any potential threat to his power is removed, and he was willing to sacrifice economic growth for political growth. China dropped to 4.9% growth. Its next year rate of growth is supposed to be 3.5%. So, one of the things that keeps the Communist Party in power is the fact that they've given a very good standard of life to their citizens. Now, if the failing economy and an aging population, that's something very few people are not, it's one of the fault lines of China. Would that unrest begin simmering inside China? Would it affect their political position? I think that is a delicate fault line which many of us, or rather the world leaders, we only talk shop. The world leaders would be definitely wanting to exploit.
Right, sir. And parallelly, of course, India has developed, like recently we saw that vaccine diplomacy was done by Indian politicians to the world relations. So, yes, of course, China is losing its hold with the other countries of the world, and India is equally at the same time trying to strengthen it. But at the same time, General Kanal, sir, I would like to know from you, what about the BRI? Like, that too seems to be losing momentum. So,
Yeah, sure.
what
The
have
the
been the
belt
gains and losses of that? The Belt and Road
the belt
Initiative.
the Belt and Road Initiative. Yeah. So it started as it was called when it started. It was called One Belt One Road. Sometime in 2010 it started, and China, because economically it had grown at a very rapid pace, they had surplus money, so they decided that they need to actually enhance their trade with the rest of the world, both over land and over sea. So that's when the OBOR started, which is now called the Belt and Road Initiative. And presently, there are about 160 countries who are part of this Belt and Road Initiative. A total budgeting of more than $1.6 trillion is there for this entire initiative. But there are fault lines, if I may borrow the term from Ajay's expose just a short while ago. There are fault lines in this Belt and Road Initiative. And I will just expound on a few of them. First thing is that, when it started, it was based on China's cash, surplus status. Also, they went into countries which were, not very, should I say, stable, and they needed money. The entire theme behind the Belt and Road Initiative was that Chinese money will be used, Chinese equipment will be used, and Chinese labor will be used. They kept promising that when the project is over, it will bring a lot of benefits to the host nation. But during the currency of the project or during the execution phase, there was hardly any participation by the host nations, and other than providing security to the Chinese people who were working there. The CPEC, that famous China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, or the the one in Myanmar, both of them are part of this BRI. And we know what problems have occurred there, where some Chinese people have also been killed. And as is the want of China, they whenever they execute something, there is no transparency, and corruption is a way of life in China. So in all these projects also, there's a lot of corruption. And when they started, China's relations with the rest of the world were pretty nice. It's only after the Wuhan virus started 2 years back that the house of cards collapsed, so to speak, and people started asking for China to sort of forgive their debt. A lot of countries in Africa have asked for forgiveness of their debt, and Angola, Zambia, you can name a few more. And what has happened in Hambantota in Sri Lanka, that is also part of the BRI. And that is the debt equity transfer which has taken place, because Sri Lanka said, I don't have the money to pay you. So China said, okay, fine, if you don't have the money to pay me, then this port becomes mine. I have sovereign rights over it. But the problem is that while you are making such huge projects, and because of the debt equity transfer, you are taking over those assets, but those assets are of no use to you. So economically, it is a big blow to China. And that is one of the reasons why today the Chinese economy is in a slide. And just as an aside, something which Colonel Ajay said, and it triggered a thought in my mind. The GDP, Chinese GDP overall is huge. But when you look at it in per capita terms, it is not so good. It is not so good because of the humongous population that China has. So per capita GDP wise, China is not so strong economically. So that is a thing. Now, what China did not foresee when it carried out its risk analysis when they were launching these BRI projects was the pandemic, the COVID-19. And because of the COVID-19, now all those projects have got stalled. And recently there has been some news that Australia is cancelling a big project. Malaysia is cancelling that Kuala Lumpur Singapore corridor, more than $1.6 billion worth. So all this is happening, and China is suffering. And surely what I feel is that the BRI steamroller has lost steam, and it's almost coming to a grinding halt. Today nobody talks about the BRI the way they were talking about it 2 years ago. So, and China needs to introspect and probably carry out a rebalancing of its strategy for the BRI, because there are people who are now planning on how to counter China's BRI. More of that later.
No. In fact, to add to what General Kanal said, a small fact, like he's right, it is losing momentum, and it reveals itself in very stark terms. I just read someplace that the Chinese budgetary allocation for BRI project has dropped 54% in this year. So what it means is they themselves are not seeing the value in the project. And also the hidden costs are coming out, the suspicion is coming out. So I do agree with him. Yes, it is losing momentum, and the alternatives emerging, more importantly.
Right. So as far as if we see gains and losses, so the gains has not been that substantial and losses has been huge, and it is keep on going to happen until they come with some different strategy for that. And as we are discussing, and in current situation, Colonel Ajay Singh, sir, I would like to ask you that they have also upped the ante with Taiwan, right? So how do you foresee things panning out there? What are the possibilities of
Okay.
a war over Taiwan?
Taiwan, as you know, it is what you call the core value of China. It's among the four core values for reunification. Reunification of Taiwan with the mainland is top on the agenda for each leader, right? And at the same time, ensuring that Taiwan retains its democratic way of life has also become a core agenda for almost most of the, or not most, all of the democratic world. Again, when they always were, it was on the cards that the reunification, either peaceful or militarily, was on the cards. When Xi Jinping took over in 2013, that peaceful agenda just kind of vanished and it became a more forceful military agenda. You see why, if you take a look at the papers, you look at this air and naval intrusions into Taiwan's air defense zone, and it is humongous. Something like 27 in a month, right? What are they doing? They're testing the waters. And also, it is an old strategy which many of the Mongols and the barbarian, well, the barbarians are wrong, okay, the Mongols, the Arabs, and other might, Alexander as well, used to adopt, is have a tremendous show of force onto a beleaguered nation and make them capitulate. So, a lot will depend on the world's resolve. China, yes, does have military designs on it taking over Taiwan by military force, irrespective of the cost they pay. A lot which is deterring them is the world support towards Taiwan. And now, fortunately, the US has now stood completely behind. They announced, in fact, during the Joe Biden Xi Jinping talk, he announced in no uncertain terms that we will stand for China and its way of life. The US, the UK had also been sending the aircraft into the Taiwan Straits and things like this. So the possibility of a war, I would say, has been there right from 1950. It is there even now. But how far will they go to prosecute it will depend largely on the world response to its aggressions. And if I may add one thing, the Indian response to their aggression in Ladakh and the LAC could well have been a test bed. Perhaps that vehemence of our own response could be a deterrent to some extent.
Right, sir. So of course, US is backing Taiwan to its fullest, as we have seen. So, like, possibilities of war is there, or it is going to go on? Because of course, China is going through an economic crisis, as you all have mentioned already. Politically, yes, they have the control over the decision-making abilities. So, do we see a war over Taiwan?
Like I brought out to you, it is on the cards. As per most analysts, the period between 2030 and 2040 was the time when they would be militarily strong to go for an attack on Taiwan. Today, the China has built up its fleet to 355 vessels, even larger than the US in terms of numbers, if not in tonnage and quantity, right? But like about a military action at this juncture, nobody can exactly predict what they're doing. But as long as world resolve and declared world resolve to stand by Taiwan is there, yes, it would deter China long enough. That
Okay.
should remain in place.
So yes, of course, lots of pushback against China, led by USA, and it is happening. So what are these actions, and do you feel it will be adequate, Kanal sir? So as we discussed, like to name a few, maybe Joe Biden not allowing US to participate in the Winter Olympics, a small one, but of course, your opinion, please.
Yes, so like I brought out earlier, and Ajay has also added to that, that ever since Xi Jinping has been elevated to the topmost position, he has an ambition to make China the undisputed global superpower. His competition is with the United States, and and if you look at it in a regional perspective, it is with the India. They are the two biggest, points of attention for Xi Jinping. Now, the expansionist actions that have been taken, like flying those huge sorties into the Taiwan Straits, also flying strike package into the waters between Japan and China. Then it's belligerent actions in the South China Sea, firing at some fishing boats and stuff like that with Philippines. And preventing freedom of navigation in the seas, absolutely contrary to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, UNCLOS. So all these things, they are cheesing off the rest of the world. Today, China stands isolated. Today, if you look at it, the only friends that China has is Pakistan, North Korea, and to some extent Russia. So it stands isolated. So there has been pushback from every corner of the world as far as China's actions are concerned. What it's doing in the South China Sea, what it's doing with Taiwan, what it did with India, and very rightly, what it tried to do with India and the way India responded. I said India has shown to the rest of the world that China is not that big a threat or that strong a power for us to be worried about. We can actually take him on. And I think the rest of the world has realized that the dragon is breathing fire, but the temperature of that fire is not very high. And so a lot of pushback. And you brought out just one Olympics thing, but let me tell you that America has been very aggressively carrying out military actions in the South China Sea. And by means of its 7th Fleet, forays into the South China Sea, aircrafts are also going there. And it is demonstrating to China its resolve to help Taiwan. That is one. Then, the primacy of the Indo-Pacific region has once again been re-established by the United States along with India, Australia, and Japan by means of the Quad. So the Quad has been sort of re-energized recently. Then we did that show on AUKUS, Australia, UK and the US with the nuclear submarine deal. So that. Other than that, there are a lot of, sort of trilateral, bilateral groupings which are standing up to China. And when President Trump was the president of the United States, he realized that, in the trade imbalance, he needs to take certain very aggressive steps against China. And he did that. So that is one of the good pushbacks against China as far as trade is concerned. Then sanctions, the human rights violations in Xinjiang, the Uyghur problem, the way what they have done in Tibet, trying to, change the demography of Tibet, the autonomy of Tibet, they've gone. So China has a habit of going back on its promises. India gave recognition to China many years ago because China had promised that it will make Tibet an autonomous region. But once we gave them recognition, they went back on their word. Then they've gone back on their word on the Treaty of Peace and Tranquility on the borders with India. So everybody knows that. So these pushbacks are happening, and boycott of the Winter Olympics. Many of the countries have cancelled their BRI contracts. So these are all part of the pushbacks against China. And also President Joe Biden, when he came to power, he had announced one, like I said, in very loose terms, you can call it a counter to the BRI, and that is called, what is it called?
Build Back Better World.
Build Back Better World, BBBW. So that is the counter. So pushback wise, I think the entire world is pushing back. And, China has already got the S-400 from Russia. But Russia is also supplying it to India. So, and where is India going to use it? Where is India going to? Do you think India is going to use it against Pakistan? No way. The S-400 which India is acquiring is meant for China. And if you look at it in very, very objectively, that is the kind of a pushback from Russia towards China. loosely.
Absolutely. Yes.
Because Russia knows this S-400 is not for Pakistan, it is for China, but still it is giving it to India. So yes, in a nutshell, like I said, China today stands isolated, other than those 2-3 friends, and pushbacks from the rest of the world are gaining steam. And I think the message is going across to China. I think, and with their economy slowing down and their internal troubles, and the demographic problem of China, as against the dividend that we have in our nation, the aging population in future, I think China has taken a step back, which it had to today. So that is the reason why they have withdrawn from many parts of Eastern Ladakh where they had it intruded, and they are just keeping just 2 of them alive. So yeah, that is exactly what I feel about the situation. But time will tell how it progresses. The Omicron variant and the way the Chinese have handled the pandemic in their own country, their vaccines are not very effective. So that's what they are doing, is they are going in for very draconian lockdowns. I saw one picture in some news report where they have even barred, with steel bars, they have blocked buildings and housing complexes for people not to come out, because they are trying to protect their citizenry from the virus in this way, because their vaccines aren't working. So China has got a lot of problems inside. There are cracks there, and
Yes.
let's see how it pans out in future. Vivek?
Right.
Yeah, if I could add on to what General Kanal said, yeah, it's the military and the political pushback. But more importantly, I think the economic pushback. If you take a look at it, like when firstly the Wuhan virus, I'm so happy we are calling it just the Wuhan virus and not bloody corona. That's its origins. Firstly, when how they started infiltrating the world's network through their 4G networks. I think one of the
Yeah.
first pushbacks was the banning of Huawei and the 5G networks in USA, UK, Europe, India, everywhere else. That was a huge loss to them. Now, once resentment began coming up with the starting of the Wuhan virus, so many industries have moved out of China to what they call to provide secure and resilient supply chains. And a country most poised to provide these secure, reliable, and resilient supply chain is India. We can utilize it tremendously advantage. If you take a look at the semiconductor laws which came about, the boost which has been given to them, we can have the world transferring a lot of the economic and it is being diverted away from China to other parts of the world. Vietnam,
And
Pakistan,
primarily beneficiaries
Bangladesh,
India.
India, yeah. And the economic pushback. Okay, economically, Australia, like General Carl said, I mean, they export most of their beef, their poultry, and pork to China. So each time they say something, they have to make a protest against the treatment of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province, and they would ban the imports, which are huge economic loss. Just a year ago, they said, okay, you ban the imports. We are still joining AUKUS. We are still going to condemn you. And they are willing to bear the economic cost because they realize in the long term that political and military stability and security that we get is worth the losses right now. So I would say the pushback has begun both in the military, the economic, the political, and the ideological field as well. In the ideological field, look at the emphasis on democracy. This recently concluded summit of democracy
Yeah.
with Joe Biden
Yes.
concluded. Why is there so much talk on democracy now? It is our democratic ideal vis-a-vis the Chinese communist ideal. And that ideal is what is going to be the binding factor of the nations which come through against China. That is why, even though they say the so-called summit for democracy was not a success, all right, but it was a message.
Yes.
All indicators that the world is closing ranks.
And another thing that signals that the world is closing ranks is the EU. Till now, the EU had not shown its cards in the Indo-Pacific, but very recently the EU has enunciated its Indo-Pacific strategy, and in which they have very, very strongly underlined the fact that they want free and fair trade and freedom of navigation, and that the Indo-Pacific should be an area of stability and peace.
Yeah.
So all these things are part of the pushback against China.
Right, sir. But again, most important food for thought for entire countrymen, I believe, that as you both mentioned, that China and Pakistan are allies. So do you see a war of India-China in near future? And how will be the Pakistan-China collusion work out in the long run? Ajay Singh, sir.
Okay, we'll both take it on. But yes, the possibility of a war with China, we have to keep the powder dry, as we say. I do not anticipate a full all-out war. Not on the scale of 62 and all that, because firstly, if it's not 62, they will never be able to attain the kind of aims. We will be able to hold them back, which is a victory for us. But yes, localized skirmishes, an increase in localized skirmishes, say like on the line of Galwan, we lost 20 lives out there, which is a big figure. These kind of skirmishes may increase perhaps all along the LAC. That is definitely on the cards. But an all-out war, no. I hope I'm right, but I do not foresee, at least not in the immediate future as such. And as far as the collusion with Pakistan goes, they are their all-weather friend whose friendship is deeper than the oceans, higher than the skies, etc., etc. And plus, Pakistan owes them a lot of money. So they will definitely do their bidding. And the collusion would be, militarily, it would be Pakistan will be utilized to keep on pinpricking India in return for Chinese diplomatic support for Kashmir. Which they have in any case, let's face it, they've in any case giving it to them. So whether we antagonize them now or not, it makes no difference. Right? But this is the kind of, and should they be the very, very drastic possibility of an all-out war, a two-front war, definitely their Western friends would definitely be utilized to keep our entire LOC active. So collusion is there, it's will remain. All-out war, at the moment, I think I'll hedge my bets and say no, not in the immediate future. Skirmishes, yes, strong possibility of it recurring.
And Kanal, sir, like China has also come in support of the Taliban-led Afghanistan. So we just don't see, Pakistan-China collusion, but here we see Pakistan-Afghanistan-China collusion. Your inputs on that, please.
So, China is very sensitive to the Taliban government in Afghanistan. And whether they like it or not, they have got embroiled in it now very badly. And they are worried about the Uyghur fighters who are part of Taliban. And they have even gone to the extent of trying to extricate Uyghur fighters from Taliban by giving them monetary incentives and trying to lure them back to Xinjiang. That is one. I tend to agree with what Colonel Ajay Singh is saying as far as the prospects of war is concerned with China. I don't see a all-out war. Firstly, the world will not permit it. Two nuclear-powered powers in the region having an all-out war, the way we know the conventional war, that will not happen. Of course, they say war by other means can also be prosecuted, cyber and, information war and stuff like that. But I don't think China, if it has to sort of get into a war with India, would like to only do that. They would like something more visible. If Xi Jinping has to consolidate his position in the Communist Party, he needs to achieve a victory which can be seen by people. And that can only happen if there is a conventional sort of an action, where you invade and, you have a battle and stuff like that, things, bombs fly, artillery fires, aircraft take part, that kind of a war. But full-scale war, I do not foresee. A limited conflict, something on the lines of what happened in Kargil, possible. But the time frame for that is hard to predict. Like I said, China is going through a lot within its own country, aging population, and their troops are also not so well trained. Though very recently, on many occasions, Xi Jinping has been telling his army, the PLA and the PLAF and the PLAN, to be ready for war. He keeps saying, be ready for war, be ready for war. But with whom? He doesn't say. And it is left for the world to guess whether it's going to be Taiwan or whether it's going to be India. There can be only two options, either Taiwan or India. And so, yeah, it's a matter of conjecture now, whether it can happen or not. But I feel that it may not happen for a very long time in the future. But like Colonel Ajay said, we need to keep our powder dry and we have to be prepared for it. And that is exactly what our nation is doing. And, we are slowly building up our border infrastructure. We are getting new equipment. We are having these arms deals. We are stressing on Atmanirbharta, producing our own weapons, our own ammunition. So all these things we are doing. And these things are not going to happen in a jiffy. They are going to take a few years, 5 years, 10 years. And so that is probably the time frame which we can look at in case something has to happen, but not something in the immediate future.
Right, sir.
And as far as the collusion, sorry, Vivek, as far as the collusion
Yes.
part is concerned, I think collusion. Pakistan outrightly cannot collude, because it cannot collude outrightly. But yes, in a very subtle manner, pinpricks, yes, it will happen. And if Pakistan tries a misadventure, I don't think China will also overtly collude with Pakistan, because it did not do it in 1948, 49. It did not do it in 65. It did not do it in 71, and neither did it do it in the Kargil conflict. So that reverse collusion, I don't think it's going to happen. But the other way around, in some way, they can support. But nothing to be worried about. I think the Indian Armed Forces are fully geared up to take on both fronts. And that is how we are actually looking at building up our capabilities and our capacities. So that is what.
Rightly said. So thank you for your insight, of course, the detailed one. But I'll ask you that China is seen as the greatest threat to the world peace since the Nazis, the Germany one. So how will that turn out? This bio war has happened. How we call it Wuhan virus, or it has brought world economy to a stall. We have inflations going up and lots of jobs lost. And again, it was initiated in China, by China, as we say it. So how do you see this turning out? How will it be countered by other countries of the world?
Okay, you mean how is the world going to get together to counter China? Right.
Yes,
Okay.
because it affected entire world.
Yeah, get it. I'm very happy brought out that it is the greatest threat since Nazi Germany. You're right, because its aggressive designs and its nationalistic fervor to reunify what was they call the traditional mainland, the traditional area of their country, Lebensraum, as the Germans used to call it. There are a lot of parallels, right? But I will draw another parallel, and that is the parallel of the Soviet Union. Even the Soviet Union was perceived as an ideological threat to the world. It was never on this scale, all right. But it eventually disintegrated under its own contradictions. Now, I do not foresee this happening with China because the extent in which the Chinese have infiltrated every aspect of the world, not their military strength. It is economically how they've infiltrated into world economies, technologically how they've infiltrated into world networks, how they've put their people in the right places in every appointment, whether it is the head of the WHO or the United Nations or UNICEF, of everybody. They are one of the largest funders of the United Nations right now. How do you expect? I mean, most of the campaigns are done through Chinese money. They have infiltrated their tentacles. I would to give them the due. They had done it very nicely. So, what they call it first would be a decoupling from China. You have to decouple the economy. You got to get them, the tentacles they got has been moved away. It started off with a ban on Huawei and other technological firms to prevent them from getting ingress into our networks. Right? Then is the disengagement, by which you provide alternatives, economic alternatives. And militarily, The counter, today we have to face one unfortunate reality is that today no nation, including the United States, is in a position to counter China alone. So the counter has to be done through alliances, not just one alliance, a series of alliances, like Quad and AUKUS being complementary, perhaps even the European Union coming into the fray. Perhaps I'm one of the things that actually quite excites me is the development of Quad as a mini NATO, as an Asian NATO, as they call it. And though many people talk about it, no, the loss of sovereignty, etc., no, it is not. It gives you a security umbrella which allows you freedom to pursue your economic agenda with so much more leeway. So these, even with India, the alliance is the more important, Quad is an important alliance. But bilateral alliances, the alliance with Japan is, I think, defining in Asia. I'm so happy. I mean, many of us have not read between the lines of the Indo-Russian re-engagement, because it is again a traditional friendship. And remember, Russia-China is a traditional hostility. So that's another fault line which we can exploit. But the greatest I'm speaking from the Indian perspective, not the world perspective. The greatest counter which can be given to China is an economic counter. Focusing on an economy to make it economically strong enough. I mean, let's face it, we are not in 5 trillion. We have 3.5 trillion. They're 15 trillion economy. It's mammoth. But it's taken them 40 years to get there. If we reach that position next, if we 10 to 15 years, we are sustaining in all other fields, which coupled with alliances, technological advance and all that, would help you keep the dragon at bay.
I'll just add, to what Colonel Ajay has said. When one looks at China and tries to analyze its weaknesses, one finds that energy security is a big, big problem there in that country.
Absolutely.
And if the world wants to actually get China to behave, then they can sanction the energy supplies to the country. And that is you choke the energy supplies to that country and they will come to heel. So that is one thing which we need to look at, as a world order, if want to control. See, the rise of China cannot be stopped. China is rising, it will continue to rise, but it can be managed. And, so we have to find ways to manage the dragon. And I think energy security is one thing which can be actually exploited. That's one. Then the other thing is, in their Xinjiang province, they have fault lines which can be exploited, should be also. And also in Tibet, the recent, that meeting between the Secretary of State of the United States with some Tibetan people at India facilitated it. Why do you think the United States is showing interest in the Tibetan issue? It's for this reason only. So Xinjiang, Tibet, energy security wise, these are the three things which I thought I'll just add on to what Ajay said. Vivek?
Right, sir. So, of course, I wanted your input. And yes, we see that China is already facing adverse relations with almost most of the countries and of the neighbors. And there is lots of internal tensions going on. And India is ready, of course, as you have mentioned. So this was the last one. Any point if you would like to add from your side, our viewers would love to listen to you.
No, thank you. I think, Vivek, it has been a very interesting discussion, very comprehensive. I think we've covered a lot of ground here, and I'd like to leave it at that.
Thank you so much, sir. We already exceeded 10 minutes ahead, but it was so interesting to know and get the insight of all the opinions that you have given that I could not, I just allowed the time to get extended. Thank you so much, Kanal sir and Ajay sir, for your time and the valuable inputs that you have provided for today's show. Thank you, viewers.
Thank you, Vivek.
We discussed about AUKUS and Quad in a previous talk, Indo-Pacific one, that you can access on the YouTube channel. That will give you more details. That's why we did not talk about AUKUS and Quad in detail here. You can find the details in a video that was, I think, we did a talk on 24th of November, so you can access it there. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sri, for your time.
Most
Thank
Have a
you.
great Sunday.
It's been a pleasure being on the show. Thank you very much.